I mean, these players really know their restricted Pokemon better than anyone else.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see this matchup as well, especially because Wolfe's team is so interesting, Aaron. The Groudon, the only Groudon in the entire Players' Cup 25th Anniversary Invitational, and that Cherrim as well, that I've got to mention, has that ability Flower Gift. So the sun that Groudon is going to be able to set for the team actually increases the attack and special defense by itself and its allies by 1.5 times. So you're definitely going to be able to keep yourself really safe, especially when you take a look at some of the special attackers that are on Naoto's team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is definitely a really fascinating matchup because I think Wolfe's team is one of the most creative teams in the tournament. Like you mentioned, you know, only Groudon. And I think Wolfe actually probably designed this team really against Zacian specifically. Like, I'm looking at the matchup here between him and Naoto, and like, it is so difficult for Zacian to do anything. You're going up against Entei, Incineroar, and Groudon. All three of those Pokemon are pretty tricky to go up against, to be honest. So Cherrim, like you called out, also a really interesting option. I think realistically, Wolfe can bring any combination of Pokemon here. You might want to be a little bit careful about setting up Trick Room with Dusclops because Naoto, of course, does have that Amoonguss. And so, yeah, I think like Wolfe can just go offensive, you know, bring the Groudon, bring the 2 fire types, and then one of the Zapdos or the Cherrim. And from Naoto's perspective, like, this is going to be tricky because, to be honest, Zacian is not good here. And that's when your restricted Pokemon is not good into the matchup. It's like, okay, what do you really do? I think part of the problem here is that Naoto's damage, so much of it comes from the Zacian. So if Zacian isn't doing damage, well, what are the other options? Regieleki does nothing into Groudon. Amoonguss doesn't do damage. Grimmsnarl doesn't do damage. So then it feels like you're really relying on Urshifu. So my eyes are on the Urshifu for Naoto. If it can, you know, put on some early pressure, then maybe you can have a Zacian sweep in the late game. Zacian is a Pokemon that could maybe Swords Dance as well. And so if Naoto has that, then maybe it's about positioning it properly. But this is definitely going to be a tricky one, I think, for Naoto going into this matchup.
Well, especially when that Urshifu on Naoto's side of the field is going to be that Urshifu Rapid Strike. It has access to those Surging Strikes to be able to deal those critical hits. But in that harsh sunlight, you know, it doesn't matter, right? So those crits are going to be able to do so much more damage, and it's going to make sure that that Urshifu can really shine. So it's definitely very critical to get that Urshifu into a proper position so it can really dish out that big damage into those Fire-type Pokemon that are on Wolfe's side of the field. But enough talking about the match. Let's just get right into it, Aaron. I'm so excited to see this match play out.
I want Cherrim. I want Cherrim.
Yeah, me too.
Let's see if we get Cherrim.
I really want Cherrim, but look at this. Naoto actually going to be leading with that Urshifu and Incineroar, and Wolfe going straight away for that offense that you were mentioning is going to be bringing out that Groudon and that Entei as well. But in the face of that Incineroar, I feel like Naoto really is able to put on a ton of pressure just because, you know, that Groudon is going to be physical and that Entei as well.
Yeah, what makes the Entei so good here, though, is that it has inner focus, so it doesn't even get intimidated, and it can't be flinched by Fake Out, right? So it's like, even if Naoto just goes for a Surging Strikes into either Pokemon, it doesn't really do that much damage. I really love this lead by Wolfe because it just applies maximum pressure, and I'm not really sure Naoto had any option to cover for this, to be honest, right? It's like, you're not going to really want to lead Zacian, especially into, as we see, the Entei here's Choice Scarf as well. So I think, yeah, Naoto makes sense leading the way he does, and you know, the Incineroar can put on pressure with a Fake Out. You know, you feel pressured to go for the Fake Out just because even at -1 attack, Precipice Blade still does so much damage. But right now, Wolfe's Entei is just in a phenomenal position, and I like the Groudon switch out, reset that Intimidate, conserve it for the late game.
Yeah, especially when you can bring Zapdos out here in front of 2 Pokemon that really like to go for contact moves. Go for the Sacred Fire onto the Urshifu. It's not super effective, but does get the burn here. Wow, 50% chance of burning from Sacred Fire. So that is definitely going to help out a little bit with some of the other attack. But oh my gosh, look at the the Surging Strikes in Sun, Aaron.
It does like 11 damage per hit.
Yeah.
And this is part of the problem, right? I think like for Naoto, so much of his team relies on offense from Zacian, but Wolfe is like the perfect anti-Zacian team, right? Between the Entei, the Choice Scarf, or the Choice Scarf Entei, the Groudon, and the Incineroar. Even Zapdos, right? These are like probably 4 of the worst Pokemon that Zacian can go up against. And so even if Wolfe didn't get that Sacred Fire burn, I think he'd actually still be off to a really strong start in the battle. But by getting the burn, now it's even more difficult for Naoto to do damage, right? So you've got the Incineroar in the back, like maybe you can pivot out the Zacian somehow, set it up. But, when you're bringing a Mungus out right now against an Entei and a Zapdos, it does not look good, right? Like, right now, the Urshifu's damage output is just really lacking. You've still got this Entei getting these Choice Scarf, Sacred Fire, in Sun. Wolfe still has the Incineroar and the Groudon on the back as well. And there's the safety goggles on Zapdos, as you can see. So it's like, this is as hard of a counter team as it gets, it really feels like. And so, even when the matchup is in your favor, you still have to execute properly. Wolfe led really, really well, made a really great play on turn 1 as well. And so, yeah, with that burn, I struggle to see how Naoto's going to do enough damage, but maybe it starts by putting some things to sleep with Spore.
Yeah, I think that Amoonguss is going to have to be a little bit of an MVP for Naoto's team just to be able to help out a little bit with some of the pressure that is coming out from Wolfe's team. Slow down the pace of the match a little bit with those spores, but actually going to go for a protect here just to make sure that it can stay a little bit safe, maybe expecting that something specific was going to come out from Wolfe's team. And that Thunderbolt, though, just going to be able to knock out that Urshifu. And so, yeah, Zapdos already just going ahead and putting on a ton of pressure.
Yeah, this has really been a perfect game by Wolfe. I think Naoto did have the small opportunity there to potentially go for Spore onto, the Incineroar slot, but obviously that's so risky, right? He was staring down an Entei with Sacred Fire in Sun. So Wolfe has the matchup, he has the momentum, and he is making really strong predictions to give him even further advantages, right? Now it's actually really, really difficult. I think I could see what Naoto was going for. The idea was basically, hey, I need to get Zacian out safely next to Amoonguss. And then the big question here is, does Zacian have something like Swords Dance? If it's Substitute, I just don't think he can do enough damage, right? But maybe if it's Swords Dance, you go for a Rage Powder, you set up that Swords Dance, you can pull something off. But because Wolfe has been playing so well as well, now you get the Incineroar in safely, and just great positioning by him.
No, for sure. But did you see the Weather Ball reveal on the Zapdos?
Oh, I didn't even.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I don't think Naoto's going to be expecting this. That's not a move that we typically see on Zapdos here. And with the Sun, that is going to turn into a Fire-type attack. But there's the inner focus here. Not going to be able to lower that Entei's physical ability. But the Swords Dance now coming out from Naoto. Oh, that's so risky, Aaron.
Yeah, it feels like it's the only play he can go for, but like you called out, Rosemary, he's got the Weather Ball on the Zapdos, and the thing is, the safety goggles make such a big difference in this matchup, right? Like, Wolfe can make that play with 100% confidence, because even if Amoonguss Rage Powders, well, you have the goggles, so you just ignore it. Now, Wolfe, I mean, he has played this game flawlessly, right? You've got Entei out now, that puts on pressure with the Sacred Fire, and, you can't get flinched by the Incineroar. Like, I don't think Wolfe could have played this game any better. But at the same time, I think Naoto's done everything in his power to keep himself in this match.
Absolutely.
It's just that Wolfe's basically been one step ahead of him. And it's, so hard to win when your opponent has a, advantageous team matchup and plays the way Wolfe is playing. But this is why Wolfe is the 2016 world champion. But once again, I think for Naoto, there's just not much he can do in this matchup. And sometimes Pokemon is kind of a matchup-based game, right? And he's done everything in his power. But yeah, with Wolfe playing as well as he is right now and the team matchup, it's just basically impossible to do anything right now.
Yeah, the Incineroar is going to be able to come out, and even though we got to see the Swords Dance come out on Naoto's Zacian, that Intimidate is going to drop the attack from the boost that we saw from the Swords Dance as well as the Intrepid Sword, but Fake Out now, which was a great read by Wolfe just to be able to switch in that Incineroar, and now that Flare Blitz going right into the Zacian before it can even move. Holy cow, that Entei is putting in so much work when it comes to just being able to deal with all of that pressure that Zacian could have put out from offensively.
Yeah, and at this point, there's just no offense, right? You're down to Incineroar and Amoonguss. Wolfe has barely been taking any damage right now. You can see how strong of a pick this Choice Scarf Entei is. Really, all of Wolfe's Pokemon, each of them have demonstrated how good they are into Naoto's team, right? Obviously, the burn on turn 1 put Wolfe in a really commanding position to start the game. I think Naoto basically has to play really risky in this matchup because you can't get away with playing safe. So going for a Spore with the Amoonguss at some point when you're worried about getting hit by something, right? There was maybe a small opportunity in this game, the turn when Naoto protected the Amoonguss, he could have maybe just went for the Spore. And Entei actually ended up switching out into Incineroar there, right? So if you put one of Wolfe's Pokemon asleep, at least you neutralize things a little bit, and suddenly Wolfe can't just make all of these free switches and attack constantly. And yeah, it's been just, as dominant of a game as possible. And so I think going into this next game, Naoto's one, I'm thinking, maybe you bring the Grimmsnarl. If Grimmsnarl can set up some screens or has some disruption, that can be really valuable.
Right.
I think Amoonguss basically has to go for some big, risky spores because otherwise, like, Wolfe is just going to outpressure you. And, even if he doesn't play perfectly, it is still already really difficult to win. And, we saw that this wasn't even a close match because of how, how Wolfe played in this game specifically.
Yeah, the way that Wolfe played and also just the matchup in general, knowing that you do have so much pressure coming out from the fire type attacks that both of the Incineroar as well as the Entei can really dish out into the Zacian specifically. So that's definitely something that you got to look at and go, that's really tough to deal with. And sometimes even Groudon has that fire type attack as well. So a lot of pressure for that very centralized focus onto that Zacian on Naoto's team.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I think like going into this tournament, I bet that a lot of the players just didn't really have Groudon on their radar. I mean, obviously, like, Groudon's a decent restricted Pokemon, but it feels pretty weak relative to the main pool of Kyogre, Calyrex Shadow Rider, Xerneas, for example. And so honestly, like, I'm guessing Naoto just in team building probably didn't think like Groudon would be a very big threat, and it's not just the Groudon on Wolfe's team. It's also like all the items are so strong here too. Like Choice Scarf makes such a big difference on Entei safety goggles, and the Weather Ball on Zapdos makes it even stronger, right? And so yeah, I think that for game 2 for Naoto, it's going to be difficult, but yeah, you got to take some risks. Maybe go for some spores with the Amoonguss on turns that you're expecting Wolfe to maybe make a switch. Grimmsnarl coming out can maybe set up the screens. And Zacian does have that Swords Dance, but even with the Swords Dance, it just still doesn't do enough damage, to be honest. But it's at least a start, right? Like your damage, 1, you need to avoid getting burnt from Urshifu. 2, you need to try to get Swords Dance off with Zacian. 3, maybe a couple spores off with the Amoonguss. So let's see how Naoto adjusts.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into the game once again. Go into that game number 2, see how Naoto does decide to adjust their game plan here. And I agree with you. I kind of like to see the Grimmsnarl here just to be able to set up those screens. And that's exactly what we are going to see here. That Grimmsnarl going to be leading for Naoto as well as that Urshifu. But Wolfe leading similar things to game number 1 with that Entei and that Groudon.
Yeah, I think, Entei and Groudon is just such a consistent lead here. You have so many options. And I think what makes this really tricky for the Urshifu as well is that, like, even with Surging Strikes, which is super effective against 3 of the 4 Pokemon, in the sun, it just really doesn't do very much damage, unfortunately. And yeah, I think for Naoto here, part of the question I have is what kind of Grimmsnarl set is this, right? Like, do you have any interesting, like, shenanigans, whether it be like Eject Button? I mean, Eject Button is a lot less common in a format like this, obviously, because there's no more Dynamax. So my guess is this is probably dual screens, just classic like Light Clay. At least you can bulk up a little bit early on. And so, yeah, one thing I have to also wonder here is whether you're willing to risk getting burnt by Sacred Fire again. But I guess Naoto probably is like, this is already a pretty tricky matchup. So I think I just have to take that 50-50 chance. But Wolfe doesn't even, stay in with Entei, so no burn chance here.
Yeah, no burn chance, but we're going to see the Surging Strikes once again come out from Naoto's Urshifu. This time into the Zapdos. Oh, gosh. It's still not going to do a ton of damage here, especially in the sun.
Yeah, a little bit better. Last time I think it did like 35 or 40 damage total. So at least you're doing, like double that. And with the Reflect, Precipice Blaze doesn't do that much. But this Zapdos set is so tricky to deal with. As you can see, Wolfe was hovering the Roost and is considering going for it. Like, how do you beat the Zapdos in terms of damage if you can just heal back everything that you do, right? Like, Roost is such a big reveal here. And so, yeah, Naoto's got the screens up, but still, it's like, where is the damage coming from right now? It's certainly really not this Urshifu, especially when Zapdos is able to just heal it all the way back up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that Roost is so crucial, just to be able to keep that Zapdos healthy. And Surging Strikes, once again, going to be coming out from the Urshifu here. I definitely think that first... Oh, gosh. Oh, no. Groudon. Just taking it like a champ.
3 super effective critical hits there, and it doesn't even do 50%. And, Roost is a smart decision there as well, because there is a small chance that Naoto maybe considers going for a, Protect on the Urshifu. And so it's always safe to just heal up there. Zapdos being as speedy as it is here, it's such a nice counter actually specifically into Urshifu. Zapdos is something that's seen, you know, resurgence in popularity, whether it be with safety goggles or something like a Rocky helmet, specifically to deal with Urshifu. The Roost makes it even trickier, right? So it's like Wolfe hasn't really taken that much damage. Now he has the Zapdos at full HP, can threaten with damage onto either Pokemon. Naoto hasn't gotten his Zacian out, even when it does come out, it just can't do very much. So even though the screens have gone up, it just really honestly feels like an impossible matchup.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Naoto's going to struggle a little bit here. Even the Aqua Jet going to barely be able to bring that Groudon to about half health. And the Thunderbolt, of course, going to be plenty to be able to pick up the knockout onto the Urshifu. And that's a ton of damage on Naoto's side of the field just gone now. Spirit Break now coming out into the Zapdos here. So it's going to be able to do a decent amount of damage as well as decrease the special attack. But Static getting revealed here. That Grimmsnarl going to be paralyzed with a 30% chance.
Let's see if it matters. I think Heat Crush here will probably just finish it off.
Yeah, that's plenty.
Yeah, that is a testament to Static, though, right? Because it's a really good ability, and that's one of the other reasons why Zapdos is really nice as a kind of Urshifu answer, right? You can switch it in on a Surging Strikes, and all those potential para chances from Static can really add up. So Naoto's down to his last two Pokemon. He actually didn't bring the Amoonguss in the end, which, you know, makes sense. Once again, it's so tricky. You're going up against three Pokemon that can potentially just one-hit KO you with fire-type attacks, and so does get Zacian in safely, does have the Incineroar out next to it, so you can maybe go for like a fake out and then a Swords Dance here, or just go for damage. Once again, the tricky thing here is that Wolfe still has that Entei in the back. That can just come in and safely click Sacred Fire at any point, right? And with the Choice Scarf, it really makes all the difference. So one thing that's been interesting in these first two rounds that we've seen, Rosemary, is just the Choice Scarf. I feel it's like Choice Scarf has been such a huge item on the Kyogre in that first game,
for sure,
on the Entei in this game. And yeah, I think at this point, Naoto, you need to go for fake out Swords Dance. It's just kind of determining who to target, but every single one of Wolfe's Pokemon has super effective damage into Zacian. Zacian is just not having a good time right now.
Yeah, poor Zacian. But, you know, I think another thing about, oh gosh, and the paralysis again from the Static ability on that Zapdos. Yes, you can get the Swords Dance off here, but is it worth it? You know, is that going to be enough here? Because Groudon, of course, can just go for those Precipice Blades. Both of them are going to connect onto both Pokemon, and it's going to do a significant chunk of damage. But Aaron, something else that I feel like has been really influential in both the Match 1 and Match 2, what we're watching right now, is not just the restricted Pokemon or the Choice Scarf, but the supportive Pokemon, the supporting actors that are at play here with each of these teams. They've just done a tremendous job of being able to support that restricted Pokemon, but also hold their own weight.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this Zapdos set has actually been really impressive. Between the safety goggles, that hard counter, the Amoonguss, the Weather Ball, and the Roost, like, you know, the items just don't get any better for Wolfe in this specific matchup. Like, it couldn't have played out any better. So once again, I honestly think Naoto's done everything in his power to try to win the match. Like, I think every play he's made has been good, right? It's just like, this turn does launch the Sacred Sword into that slot, actually, and so Groudon safely protected here. Like, if Naoto, you know, maybe he needs to make big reads here, basically. Unfortunately, gets paralyzed with the Incineroar as well, so nothing going in his favor this turn. And that might just seal up the game, honestly, because at this point, you know, the Zacian can't heal itself, and there's just so many Pokemon super effective damage. There's still this Entei in the back, by the way, just waiting to come in and click Flare Blitz. And so, you know, Wolfe willing to concede the Zapdos or potentially, right? Even if Naoto calls it correctly and you double up into the Zapdos, well, then you just bring the Entei and you just keep clicking Flare Blitz into the Zacian slot. So, yeah. Zacian is just unfortunately not very good into this matchup, and it's a testament to Wolfe's team building to build a team like counters Zacian this hard.
Especially when that was just a hard meta call, right? That maybe multiple players were going to be able to bring that Zacian as one of the top restricted Pokemon in the format right now. Unfortunately, the Incineroar is going to switch in and get knocked out on Wolfe's side of the field, but it did get a little bit of that Intimidate drop onto both of the physical Pokemon on Naoto's side. But that Thunderbolt's not going to be enough. So we are going to see that Flare Blitz be able to fire back from Naoto, and that is going to be a double knockout here from Naoto.
Yeah, and, you know, Wolfe's now set up his endgame. You just get the Entei in with that Choice Scarf, outspeeds the Zacian, so you just click Flare Blitz into Zacian, Precipice Blades, and Naoto, like the issue is once again, there's no damage output into this Choice Scarf Entei, and there's nothing that outspeeds it either. So Wolfe willing to concede a bunch of Pokemon here because at the end of the day, it's not about the number of Pokemon that you have at the end, it's just whether or not you win. And so he's pivoted himself really safely, right? Like the one thing you don't want to do when you have this lead, if you're in Wolfie's position, is to just throw away the Entei. So all you need to basically do is say, okay, I'm going to give you a knockout, and if you get that KO, well, then I just get a free switch in, right? So all Wolfe had to do is make sure he didn't switch out that Zash or switch in that Entei into a Zacian Sacred Sword. Doesn't at any given point. And once again, the issue here is that Naoto's Incineroar just doesn't really do any damage. A lot of his team, unfortunately, just doesn't have great damage output because this team is so heavily built around Zacian. But Naoto really getting a tough draw here in the first round, running into probably the most anti-Zacian team I've seen.
Absolutely. Choice Scarf is going to allow that Entei to move very, very quickly to be able to go ahead and knock out that Zacian. And now you've got a single target Precipice Blades that can knock out the Incineroar. Wolfe Glick also winning their winners round 1 match in a 2-0.